All right, with that being said, I want to introduce our speaker for today. Our speaker for today is Dr. Rebecca Hernandez. She serves as the Organizational Development for Racial Equity Director at Mennonite Central Committee, MCC, otherwise known as MCC, a Christian international relief and development organization. Previously, she worked at George Fox University from 2014 to 2022 and Goshen College from 2008 to 2014, both historic peace colleges. Through her administrative roles in academia, government, and nonprofit sectors, Dr. Hernandez has developed and advocated for policies and programs to serve diverse communities through health and education. She completed her PhD in Human Development and Family Studies at Oregon State University, her master's degree in Public Administration at Portland State University, and her BA in Education at Southeastern University. Dr. Hernandez has written several articles and book sections about Christian higher education and race, including Diversity Matters, Race, Ethnicity, and the Future of Higher Education, Christian higher education, and Thriving in Leadership, Strategies for Making a Difference in Christian Higher Education. In addition, Dr. Hernandez has served as inaugural counsel for Christian Colleges and Universities Commission for Diversity and Inclusion and formation of Multi-Ethnic Leadership Development Institute in 2011. Finally, she has presented nationally and internationally for over 30 years. Dr. Hernandez grew up in Illinois, Idaho, and Oregon, where her family settled after a time as migrant farm workers. She enjoys travel, service, and meeting new people and spending time with her friends and family. Would you please help me welcome Dr. Rebecca Hernandez as she comes to share with us today?
Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everyone. No pressure. I'm the only speaker, this week? Yay. So let's start with that. The other thing is no pressure. I'm not supposed to fall forward into a pit, which is a little scary, so make sure I don't do that. If I get close, somebody say, Stop. Thank you. That'd be helpful. And then also, don't open the door. Even though you see a door, that's the first thing you want to do, right? No? Okay. It's just such an urge to oh, there's a doorknob. Let's see what's behind there. But we're not going to do that. So, yeah. No pressure. And then he mentions that I'm the only speaker for the week. Good luck. Thanks. Okay, with that, and no worship to kind of get you in the mood there a little bit, so we're going to have quite the fun today. Well, let me start out with saying I've been started out my career early on, as I mentioned in the piece, as a middle school teacher. So I taught middle school, smelly boys, crying girls, all that kind of stuff. Lots of opportunity to learn from middle schoolers. That was fun. So when I ask you something and there's no response, let me tell you something. I'm used to silence and I can outweight you. So when I ask a question or something, I'm hoping for some response. That would be thrilling. And those of you, anyone else who's doing homework, I will not try to disturb you for long. So please, follow along if you can. How's that? Sound good? Okay, great. So let me start with this. Since we have sort of this beautiful setting for a theater makeup, kind of a start, I'm going to ask you this question. I start to tell you a little bit about a story that I think about. In my head, I travel a lot, first of all. I travel quite a bit, fly a lot, spend a lot of time in different places working for an international relief organization, which we'll talk about in a minute. But one of those things I do is I kind of go through the airport and I see the signs for different places. It'll say, Palm Beach, or it'll say, Rome, or it'll have, New York, LaGuardia, all these places. And I feel like I'm like Walter Mitty. Does anybody know who Walter Mitty is? Nope? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you about a story that is Walter Mitty. So the Secret Life of Walter Mitty is actually based on a movie, 2013. Does anybody know Ben Stiller? Okay, the movie was The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Now, I want to tell you not about Ben Stiller because I wanted to reference that first because that movie was actually based on another movie that was started Danny Kaye in 1947. Now, before you ask, no, I didn't see it in its original year. It was done. That was a joke. You're supposed to say, of course not. You're so young looking. There's no way 1947. I wasn't born then, just to be clear. Yes, you're right. You're right, Dr. Hernandez. There's no way you could have been born then. All right, thank you. Come on, guys, get with me. Let's go. So anyway, but in that movie, Walter Mitty is an ordinary kind of guy. He's kind of quiet. He's very unassuming. He's kind of pushed around by his mother and his wife, and he's kind of always bumbling along. But in his mind, he has these great adventures. He's a war hero in one, and the whole movie's about his daydreams, right? So he has these 4 or 5 major daydreams. In that, he's a war hero. He's a doctor, he's a sharpshooter, and a captain. And he dreams of being this huge hero. That's the story. That's the whole story in the original movie. And the whole thing is about who he is and how who he is seems like not to be enough for him. And so the whole movie is about him being these kind of famous or, kind of cool, romantic hero kinds of personalities. And in the end, actually, the last sort of fantasy he has, he's actually smoking a cigarette. This was way before cancer, and we don't do that anymore. Have those movies anymore where he's smoking a cigarette and he's facing a firing squad. That's kind of like the movie. It's a little weird, but it's kind of a fun movie. If you get a chance, YouTube it, you'll see it. And so anyway, this whole movie. So I like this movie, and frankly, the superhero movies of today, I love Iron Man, I love all the, Civil War, the whole thing, all these movies, because they remind me of the kind of daydreams many of us have. We have a lot of daydreams, to be something great, to be a hero, to do these incredible things, right? Incredible things in life. That's kind of what we dream of. Nobody else dreams that? Don't we tell you that? You can be a hero, you can save the world? Oh, yeah, we hear that. Okay, I may be the only one. So sometimes when I hear the introduction like I heard today, I get introduced as a speaker, and I'm always surprised to hear that introduction, because I wonder who that person is they describe. Have you ever had that when you're hearing a speaker or someone come along and they have this long list of accomplishments, right? Do you ever think, how did they get to be that person? Wow, that's amazing. How did they decide? How did they reach that pinnacle? I'm not saying I've reached a pinnacle. Let's be honest here. I'm a professor, former professor, administrator. I'm a great administrator. That's what I do. But that's like, ooh, a hero. I can push paper like nobody else. Yes, give me an applause. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. I think it's pretty cool. But for me, I'll be honest, I don't think of it as a list of accomplishments. I, too, sat where you're sitting. Yes, we had crayons then. I'm not chalk, no, it's a joke. I sat where you're sitting, and at that time, I used to think, wow, how do you make these life decisions? How do you decide to do this and to become this great, this doctor, this PhD, all that kind of stuff? It wasn't about decisions. I'll be honest with you, they weren't fabulous decision-making. It was more about choices. They were about things that I wanted to do, that I felt interested in, and that I made a choice about. So they were also life's callings, God called me to some things, and I really like it. I'll be honest about the way I chose a major. So I have an undergraduate degree, where you are, and a bachelor's degree in education. I heard someone, woohoo, education. How many education majors? Woo! Yeah. And you might have, in my day, they had elementary and secondary. Is that still the case? Yes. And I actually wanted to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I thought I would be an elementary school teacher because I was, number one, I'm kind of short, and 2, I wanted to be taller than the other kids. But that was the only thing. I wanted to be an elementary school teacher because I liked kids, I thought. But then I went to elementary school classes, and one of the first things is, also those of you who are art majors will get this, I chose to be a secondary school teacher teaching social studies because I didn't like doing bulletin boards. I am left-handed, so I tend to write and my hand slopes down, like that. And I could not come up with the slogans that people have on their bulletin boards. And so I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm not cutting out things and putting up these pretty little bulletin boards. That's really it. I'll be honest, that was it. That's how I decided to become a social studies teacher and not really a calling. That was it. So, but one of the things that I wanted to tell you about, like Walter Mitty, I wanted to be someone who wasn't ordinary. And I'm not ordinary in some ways. I've learned that I may be what other people might consider me ordinary or a minor character, but I'm really not a minor character. I'm a major character in somebody's life. And that's going to be what we're going to talk about today. Sometimes I was a major character in good ways, and that's what we hope for, right? That we're good characters in positive ways. But to be honest, I'm also human, and I would imagine, I'm praying, that I've matured over time and that I was a major character in someone's life, maybe not in so good a way. I was that cautionary tale, or that person who was cruel, or that person who may have been unkind. I pray that somehow the Lord redeemed that for good in that person's life. But I have to also think about the fact that it wasn't always good. But minor characters in God's economy are still critical, and they make a difference. So we're going to look at minor characters today in the Bible. We're going to look at 3. And like I said, I'm not good at the slogan, so my title of this story is sermon is this: the minor characters who were not so minor. Right? Not a very good slogan. Could you come up with something catchier? Some of you might be able to do that. But we're going to go with it. First, the older brother in the prodigal story. So the prodigal story, what do we know about the prodigal story? This is where you help me out. Help me out. Who's the prodigal son? Tell me the story, somebody. I'm going to look for you, and you raise your hand and tell me. I know this isn't like how sermons go, but I'm going to kind of go with it. Yes, ma'am. That's right.
And he's like, oh, I remember my dad. He treats his servants so well. I'm going to repent. I'm going to come back and ask just to be a humble servant. And then the dad sees the son, runs to him, which is not culturally normal.
Right.
And it's basically just like, I love you. I care about you. And I'm just glad that you're home. And then
okay, stop there. Thank you. Good job. Let's give her a hand. Good job. Woo! Good theological teaching there. Very good job, Ryan. Woo! Whoever you are teaching, that's exactly right. That's the story, but that's where we pick it up. So that he comes back with a repentant heart, which is what we learn about. And he's kind of the story, right? We always talk about the prodigal son. And when we look at the older son, I have to admit, I've always had sympathy for him, and I've always been like, I don't know about you. Is anyone, I'll just ask this, you don't have to raise your hand very high or even at all, but I've always been like, I think he's right. The older son, right? He did everything right. He was following the rules. He was doing the work. He was out in the fields actually working. And the father's having this party for the son who squandered it all. I get it. I sympathize with the older son because I've been that person. But what's the story? What is that? What is going on about this? So here, let me just read it to you. But the minor character, known as the older brother, here's what I'm going to read to you. All this time, his older son was out in the field. This is the Message version, which I happen to like a lot because it helps me to understand it better. When the day's work was done, he came in. As he approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. Calling over one of the houseboys, he asked, "What's going on?" He told him, "Your brother came home. Your father has ordered a feast, barbecued beef." I love that, right? Barbecued beef. Because he has a home, and this is Kansas, yay, barbecued. Because he has a home, because he's home safe and sound. The older brother stomped off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. The son said, "Look, how many years I've stayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief, but have you ever thrown a party for me or my friends? Then this son of yours, not even my brother, this son of yours, right, who has thrown away your money on whores, shows up, and you all go out with the feast." Now, don't tell people I said that word, but it's actually in the Bible, just to be clear. Okay? Prostitutes, we'll say that. His father said, "Son, you don't understand. You're with me all the time, and everything that's mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time, and we had to celebrate." This brother of yours, he's trying to connect him to that, right? He's trying to reconnect him. He said, "Your son," that son of yours, and he's saying, "Your brother who was dead, and he's alive. He was lost and he's found." So I kind of used to sympathize with the older son. I'll be honest with you. I've always said that. I kind of feel like he gets a bad rap, but here it is. What were the sins of the older brother in this? Well, self-righteousness. The older brother acted morally superior to his brother, and he lacked what? Mercy, empathy, or even sympathy. If it'd be different if the younger son came back and said, hey, that wasn't enough money, and he was in a really same spirit, if he was in the same attitude as before, you can kind of see, he hasn't repented. But he came back repentant. He was starving, and he was eating, and he said, I'll be a servant in my father's house. I don't even need to be a son anymore because I know I screwed up. I know I broke it. I ruined it. But I'll leave it, kid, if I can just be a servant. But he comes back in the repentant heart. But this older brother doesn't have any sympathy or empathy or even any mercy for him. This is the issue. He also had envy, right? There's envious. He was envious of him. He's angry at his father for celebrating this return, and he feels envious that he gets a celebration that he never had. And finally, the big one, though, is this: spiritual pride. The older brother has forgotten and never understood the grace of God. He says, I've been doing the work in the field, but he's not in the house with the father, looking, waiting, or I imagine even praying for his younger rebellious brother. He was not doing the work of God. So here's this lesson for me, and I have to think about that in my own life. Have I been that older brother? Not repentant, not sympathetic, have morally superior, envious, and frankly, I've been doing God's work, but forgot about God in the process. Be aware of that. Be careful. How you do the work is just as important as the work that you do. How you do the work is just as important as the work that you do. Let's look at the next character. Okay, who knows this one? The woman with the issue of blood. Anybody out there? Woman with the issue of blood. What's the story on this? Wow, no takers? Okay, right here. Oh, I'll get you here, and then I'm going to give you the second one. Come on in. You can just stand up. You don't have to go. She freaked out. She's like, what? No, just stand up and tell us really loud. What's the story? Oh, a microphone. Wow, you do. Okay.
She had a bleeding problem, and then when Jesus was walking through the crowds, she touched his robe, and she was healed.
Okay. Who is the other character in this story? Does anybody know? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she was just brushing her hair back. I thought she was actually going to yell out. Jairus. If you think about it, it's in Mark. I think it's in Mark. Let me make sure. Yeah, Mark 5. Jairus is the man who comes to Jesus. He's got the daughter who's dying, right? So here's the story. After Jesus crossed over by boat, a large crowd met him at the seaside. One of the meeting place leaders named Jairus came. When he saw Jesus, he fell to his knees beside himself as he begged, "My dear daughter is at death's door. Come and lay hands on her so that she will get well and live." Jesus went with him, the whole crowd tagging along, pushing and jostling him. Now that's what's happening. So he's trying to get to his house because his daughter's dying. He's a very important leader, and he comes and he begs. So he's like at his desperation point. He's begging Jesus. Jesus, again, remember, is not the Jesus that we know today. Jesus was considered sort of a heretic. He was like, who is this guy? He's kind of getting a reputation, but he was not the kind of Jesus that we serve today. So he wasn't known then. But what's happening at the same time, this is like a soap opera. So coming out of this door is Jairus, and coming over here was a woman who had suffered a condition of hemorrhaging for 12 years. A long succession of physicians had treated her badly, taking all her money and leaving her worse off than before. She'd heard of Jesus. She slipped in from behind and touched his robe. She was thinking to herself, if I can put a finger on his robe, I can get well. The moment she did, the flow of blood dried up. She could feel the change and knew her plague was over and done with. At the same moment, Jesus felt energy discharging from him. He turned around the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robes?" His disciples said, "What are you talking about? With this crowd pushing and jostling you, you're asking who touched you? Dozens have touched you." But he went on asking, looking around to see who had done it. The woman, knowing what had happened, knowing she was the one, stepped up in fear and trembling, knelt before him, and gave him the whole story. Jesus said, "Daughter, you take a risk of faith, and now you're healed and whole. Live well, live blessed, be healed of your plague." While he was still talking, some people came from the leader's house and told him, your daughter is dead. But let's stop right there. So in between the live well, live blessed, be healed of your plague to the woman, and the other scene happens, there's a break. Jairus is walking with Jesus, and he's kind of hurrying him along. There's a crowd, and people are jostling him, and he's going, excuse me, move, excuse me, come along, Jesus, come along. And he's probably urgent, right? He's urgent. His daughter is dying. He's urgently kind of hustling Jesus along. Jesus knows what's going to happen, but, nobody else does. Kind of the da-da scene. This woman touches him, and he stops. Would you imagine a woman who has not spoken to others, she's been seen as unclean, she's outside of the center of the community, she's ostracized, she's isolated, she's alienated, she's seen as, like basically the refuse of the world. She's like not even a good member. She's actually set aside. If she's been alone and not talking to anyone, no one's paid attention to her for 12 years, do you think she's going to when Jesus says, tell me your story, do you think it's going to be like a very short 5-minute conversation? I have the attention of the healer, someone who's healed me. I'm a miracle walking. You think it's going to be like, oh yeah, then I just paid a lot of money, all these doctors for 12 years, they checked my money, but thanks. No, it's going to be like, let me tell you, I went to this first doctor, and this doctor said this, and I said, I don't think that's true, and he had me do these tests, and these tests ran long, and da-da-da, and it goes on. And she's telling him her feelings. She's been ashamed. She's been broken. She has been isolated. She's been ostracized. I would be talking a lot like I'm doing now. I would be telling him every move, every action, and then he said this, and I said, there's no way. And he said, it would have been that. So this is what's happening with her, and there's this intense conversation with someone who's paying attention to her, and there's a crowd of people, and they're all paying attention to her. I would imagine if I was Jairus, I'd be on the edges of that crowd going, come on, let's go. My daughter is dying. Come on. In his mind. He knows that this is the right thing. He knows that this is a good thing for this woman, but you know what? I don't care. It's not my daughter. I would be ticked. I would be anxious. I would be frustrated. I would be, come on, let's go. And yet, he stands there. I wonder if he thought, my daughter is dying, I should spend the last few minutes with her. What am I doing wasting my time if this guy's going to be just chit-chatting along the way? Part of me would be so frustrated saying, at least I could be with my daughter, but I don't know what to do. Should I go and be with her? But this is the only miracle we have. This is the only opportunity we have to maybe she might be healed. What would you do? But he stood there. And then he gets the worst news ever. Don't bother him anymore. She's dead. Don't even be polite anymore. Let's just go. She's dead. This guy was useless to us. I would be so angry every time I saw that woman in the community now who's healed and who's, instead of being joyful for her, I would be resentful. She has taken my gift. She took my miracle. Wouldn't you think that? Yeah. But Jesus says, don't listen to them, just trust me. And I don't know if Jairus actually trusted him, to be honest. I would imagine he's just sort of overwhelmed with grief. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, whatever. But there must have been some part of him that just, like, the stages of grief, you want to just, maybe he's not there yet. He's not into acceptance. He's just sort of like, okay, whatever. The Bible says you just have to have a kernel of faith, right? A just tiny mustard seed of faith. Maybe he had that. It goes on, and you know the rest of the story. So Jairus, again, in that moment of anxiety, he's watching this happen with this woman who's like really a nobody in the world's eyes, in his community's eyes. He's feeling this urgency. He would have been stressed out. He's probably feeling fearful, she's fear for her imminent death. He's impatient. And there's probably some conflict in his heart saying, I know that we're supposed to care about other people, about people who are in need, but what about my need? This is what I do for a living, so I'm going to tell you this now. I do diversity work, right? And I tell people about how we need to think about equity and inclusion, and then I get the backlash, and maybe some of you are already kind of starting to come up and you're going, oh God, she's going to do that talk. No. But here's the story, right? Here's the example. Jesus healed the woman, and he raised this daughter from the dead. What does that tell us? When we say Jesus cares for all of us, this is an example of that. And it tells us that Jesus is enough for all of us. You getting a win doesn't mean I get a loss. And if someone else gets something, doesn't mean you don't get something. It may not be the exact same thing, but it is definitely in God's economy. This world will tell you that someone else has to lose for you to win. Someone else has to lose something so that you can gain something. That's not true. It's a lie. It's a lie of the devil. We are all made in the image of God, so you matter. You matter. You matter. We each matter greatly to God. So I'm going to tell you, when I talk about diversity, and I do that, if I was to do a training here, we'd be talking about equity and implicit bias and all that, but from the perspective of a biblical text that says we are loved by God, each and every one of us, and we are enough. And there is plenty for God, from God's economy for each of us. It is not what you may feel is the same for what they're getting, but it is what you need. And in God's economy, he is enough. This is the story of that. The woman at the furthest outer circle and the man from the furthest inner circle, both in desperation, and they both got what they needed. Finally, the last minor character is not even named. It's the unnamed disciples. Believers, let me say it this way. In Acts chapter 9, Paul's conversion happens. What's the story of Paul's conversion? Anybody out there know Paul's conversion story? I need one last brave soul. All right, do you know the Paul's conversion story? Yes. Yeah. All right, you get to do it.
Okay.
Loud.
Okay. So Saul was persecuting the church. He was what you'd call like a really good Jewish man.
Mm-hmm.
And he was persecuting the Christians. And he got permission to go to another city to persecute the Christians. But on the way, there was a light, and Jesus showed up and was like, hey, why are you persecuting me? And then when Jesus went away, he was blind. And so then he had to go for 3 days, and he was blind. And then on the third day, he didn't eat or anything. And then on the third day, his eyes were open, and he was completely changed.
Right, and he became a follower of Jesus, right? Right. Thank you very much. Good job. All right, you guys know your theology or Bible stories. This is great. Now listen to this story. So in this piece, Paul has changed, but he's got a reputation for having killed the Jews. We're talking like he was hardcore. He was very, very bad dude, from a Christian perspective. He's killing us. Literally, stoning people. He's holding the coats of those who stoned, but he kind of incited the crowds. He incited the rioters, right? And he's thinking he's doing this out of a righteousness, out of a good place, which many people might think, oh, sorry, go ahead and take a nap. That's okay. So righteousness, right? He's doing a righteous thing. But it turns out he's not. So Ananias is the one who the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. If I was Ananias, I'd be like, that's cool. He's going to suffer. All right, I can do this. But that's not who we're talking about. Ananias went up to the house and he entered in. He's placing his hands on Saul. He said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus who appeared on the road as you were coming here has sent me that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. So that's when you're right. That's the story. He gets prayed for, his scales fall off, and then he begins to immediately talk about Jesus in this conversion story. But in the same verse, chapter 9, verses 19 to 21, he came, when it says the disciples, he came to Jerusalem and he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. Yeah. Would you want him to come? Would you hey, come on in. We know you kill all these people, but you're saying you're a different person. Come on into our secret hideout where we're all hiding. Join us, please. Is that what's going to happen? They're all afraid of him, rightfully so. But then there's one or two who do something different. But Barnabas, we'll find out, you hear a lot about him later, but Barnabas took him in and he brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. Barnabas is one of the first to bring him along, and he did something that we call in Spanish recomendado. I'm not sure this, recomendado means to recommend, but it's not just recommend, it's saying I'm putting my reputation on the line for this person. I'm giving my name to this person. So if you trust me, I'm telling you can trust him. We do this all the time, right? Sometimes we'll say, this guy's a good person, or yeah, you should hire him, and then he turns out to be a bad employee. What happens? Your reputation is trashed. So you got to be careful, right? So we carefully do this. We don't do this all the time. That means, and it's not just recomendado in Spanish, we also say enchufado, which is basically means the idea is that he is plugged in. It's not enough that Barnabas comes along and recommends him. We wouldn't care if Barnabas came along and recommended somebody to us. We would know Barnabas. Barnabas has an in with us, has an in with the disciples, so he's well known to them. So he has respectability. He has social capital, right? And then he says, based on my good reputation and my being plugged in with you guys, I'm saying this guy's a good dude. Bring him into the secret hideout. Despite his reputation. And the disciples accepted him. Now imagine and there was another version of the story, basically another version of the Bible that talks about the disciples brought him in. Now, it just says that. You don't know who these disciples were, but they're anonymous, but they're actually the people who kind of took that first step and accepted him. I wonder if they met in a coffee shop first. Let's just meet you at a coffee shop first before we take you to the secret place, because we're not sure if you're really going to work out. Or if the Bible intimates that they actually brought him into the secret place, like all the way in. Not kind of in a coffee shop to meet first. It's critical to pay attention to these characters because they changed the direction of the story quite a bit. Your reputation matters. To be trusted, it's based on your actions. Here's the thing. What's the lesson for today? You're probably wondering, what is the main point of all these characters? We as adults, we as administrators, we as professors, we as leaders, do you young people a disservice, I think, at times. By saying, go out and change the world. You are the world changers. It's up to you and this generation to change the world for Jesus. I think we do you a disservice in that. I'm leaving so I can say that. If somebody else says something else, they can do that. We do this high-pressure sales on you. And I think that's a misnomer. We pretend like you're going to be the Walter Mitty's of the world, right? These heroic figures. But the reality is, you are a major character in a story that is smaller, perhaps. You're not to be out to the entire mission field. Your mission field is those that God has given you in your circle or in your area. I heard it too when growing up. How much do you think it was that I was the daughter of a migrant worker? My first language is Spanish, learned English in the 3rd, 4th grade, was really smart. You're so smart. Became a student, high school student, government stuff. I did all the junior achievement. I did all that stuff. Some thought I had potential, so I could be a really good supervisor at the local factory. That was the one. Another was I followed other people along to find out how to apply to college, and I got into college. So then it was like, wow, you really are smart. And then you do this, and then I did my master's. And then someone said, you should get your PhD, and I was like, it wasn't like I thought about going to get a PhD, I'll be honest with you. I did that because I was embarrassed that this woman kept encouraging me to come to PhD to get a PhD. And I thought, I'll just take the GRE, the test you have to get in. And when I fail, she'll be so embarrassed for me that she won't mention it again. But I actually passed it. And then I was like, oh, now I'm stuck. But they gave me all this money to go to school. So that's how I went to school. I mean, I wish I could tell you that I had this big plan and that God had opened all these, made this path really clear. He just opened one step and one step and one step, and I just did what the next thing was. That's what life is like, folks. I don't think that we do you a favor by telling you you're going to, this is who you're going to be at the end. You don't know that. Whatever your next step is, if you're following God and doing the next step, that's the right step. As I did all that learning about, hearing about potential and you're great for this and that, I also learned that while I wasn't a president of a university or a college, which was an aspiration I had at one point, because I was supposed to do that. I thought people kept telling me I was supposed to do that. Or I wasn't a giant, or a famous preacher, or an influential political leader. I still made a difference in someone's life, maybe a couple of someone's along the way. I may be a minor character in the world's eyes, but in God's economy, I'm a major character who is well known by the Creator. He knows me. He knows all of me. In my sphere of influence or in my circle of work or loved ones in my family, I'm a big deal. I'm telling you, I'm a big deal. My 3-year-old grandnephew thinks I'm the best singer and the best dancer and the best of everything. I am really a terrible singer, and I can barely clap. I can't clap on beat. Some of the fun that my nieces and nephews have is standing next to me in church and getting me off beat on purpose. That's how bad we are. I am at that. But I'll sing along, and it'll be terrible, and the 5-year-old says, Thea, stop singing. And I go, Lucas, he's telling me to stop singing. He goes, Thea, you sing all you want, and I'll play the guitar. And he has this little plastic guitar, and he just plays, and I sing, and it's terrible, but we love it. And he thinks I'm a big deal in his life. My spending time with my nieces and nephews and my spending time with young adults is the critical thing. I may be nobody in the world's economy, but in God's economy, in their eyes, because of my commitment to them, I am somebody. I'm not a minor character. I'm a major character. And a student I had over 30 years ago who I helped through a dark time in her life, and we stayed in touch with her through high school, through college, through graduate school, into a career where she's now helping other people. I was a major character for her. Don't be consumed with changing the world, but be involved with changing the world for those God has put in front of you, for those he calls you to. The world may see you as a minor character, but doing what you're called to do in obedience to that call and that's what it is to live out your faith. To do one thing and then the next thing and the next thing. I wouldn't be able to leave this place without having said to you a little bit about MCC, where I work. Mennonite Central Committee. Does anybody know Mennonite Central Committee? Okay, some of you do. Mennonite Central Committee is owned by 6 of the churches, peace churches. Mennonite Brethren is one of them. We do international relief work in 40 countries. Right now, we're working in Gaza. We've been in Ukraine for over 100 years before. That's where we started out of, Ukraine, working in Ukraine, what was then Russia, 100 and some years ago. We're in Lebanon right now. We have people on the ground and making sure they're safe and all of that. The Democratic Republic of Congo and a bunch of other places, Ethiopia and then Latin America and a bunch of other places. I don't personally work on the front lines of farming land restoration or delivering food or emergency kits to these people in these countries and war-torn countries. I have a minor role. I'm the Organizational Development and Racial Equity Director. What is that? Administrator. Program developer. That's what I do. I train our staff on the ground here that come here to train, and then they go out and serve the world. I'm in this kind of academic role. But I do a major work where I am because I obey what God has called me to do. When I do this work, I ask myself 3 questions, and then we'll go from there. One is my attitude focused on the Lord and not just the tasks. Doing stuff is not the same thing as serving God. I could be handing out blankets. I could be doing, all kinds of other stuff, but am I doing it? Again, what is that reminder? How we do the work is just as important as what work we do. 2, am I willing to honor all people? We have one of our signs that we have in our training PowerPoints is love your neighbor, no exceptions. Am I willing to honor and love all of God's people? Even those we as Americans or we as Christians or we as this political party or that political party consider on the outside or the margins or as nobodies. Do I love all of God's people? No exceptions. Do I remember that we are each made in the image of God? Everyone is broken like me, loved by God like I am, worthy of time and focus and attention like God has given to me. Do I remember that? And finally, am I listening and obeying the Lord to do what he asks even when it doesn't make sense to me in this world view? If I do what he asks, does that mean I have less? They get more, I get less? No. Am I willing to do what God has asked me to do no matter what? I will say this, remember we have openings for you as young adults to do service work with us at MCC. Yes, absolutely. If God is calling you to that, we have SALT program, which is serving and learning together. After college, you can come and serve with us for a year to 2. We have what we pay as a living, we do a stipend that's kind of a middle-class existent living in whatever country you're in, not the US standard, but in that country. Also help pay for your student loan payments while you're out in the world, working, serving, something to think about, that's important. And we also have long-term service workers positions that are like employment. So if you're in accounting or if you're in education or you're in theater, any of these pieces, we might have jobs for you. I want you to pay attention to that. That's important too. And we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you join us. However, if you're called by God to serve as a teacher in your local schools, to lead a business here, to work as a doctor in a Native American reservation here, or to just work in a local community, whatever God has called you to do, do that. Do that with the same commitment, serving God faithfully and blessing others as you would if you were that hero on the front lines in Afghanistan or Lebanon, or Gaza, or Nicaragua, or anywhere else in the world. Do that as faithfully there. Remember, your calling is a key element of the story of God's work and provision for someone else. Would God still make it happen if you didn't do your part? Of course. But you get to do a part of it, God's work, and just do that. Do it faithfully, do it well, remember how you do it with the attitude, the right attitude. You have a part in that. Be the servant of God like the minor characters in the Bible who are noted throughout history. Some of them didn't even get named, but that's okay. They may be minor characters in the world's thoughts, but they're major characters in God's economy. God bless you as you go out, and I want to remind you about this. Number 1, you had one speaker this week. She was fabulous. Right? Yeah, thank you very much. And if that isn't true, number 2, I let you out early. I'm the speaker who's going to let you out a little early. With that, I'm going to let you go.